Most of the 36 before 37 were China or Russia. There's one or two Iranian groups. There's one out of Vietnam. And then we have our second group out of North Korea.
So what are they doing? How did you find this? And how concerned should we be?
You know, you should be concerned, and here's why. Basically, it's following the normal progression that we see. When you're developing offensive capability as a nation, normally you restrict your activities on government, then it's military on military. And we've seen APT-37 since 2015, but they've been operating since 2012. And they decided just recently to stop doing just military against military, and they're starting to hack the private sector. And they're also starting to hack off the Korean peninsula. So they've gotten good enough that they're tier 1 targets. They can now operate at the scale and scope where they're beyond tier 1, and they're starting to hit other tangential targets.
Do they do that because they lose against our military and our government computers, so they figure they'll go find other covert ways of getting around it?
No, I don't think that's it. I think they were focused on South Korea first, and now they're focused on other interests besides South Korea. So I think it's just their capability has gotten to the point where they can take on more targeting, work at a wider breadth.
What does the U.S. government do with information like this?
You know, you need to be aware of it because you want to be able to defend against it. But it's a tough one. I mean, because of the anonymity on the internet and because every modern nation's following different rules of engagement, you got to be aware of the threat intelligence. You got to be aware that they exist. But I'm not so sure there's risks or repercussions to what the North Koreans are doing in cyberspace.
Well, that's what you bring up, this idea that there used to be almost rules of engagement.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. When you think about the Russians being potentially involved trying to sway elections, not just here, but other places too.
It's definitely different. You know, when I was responding to breaches in the military in the 90s, you could expect what the Russians would do. They'd hack military against military, and whenever we caught them, they kind of went away. That was the rules of engagement. They may not have been written, but they were followed. And I would say the Russians, they strayed from their normal rules of engagement in 2016.
So how do we as a nation, how should we respond?
We're going to have to figure this one out.
I mean, do we stray from rules of engagement too?
You know, I doubt it. You know, from what I've observed, we're a nation of laws, a nation of rules, and we tend to operate within some confines of those rules. But I've seen Russia get more aggressive in the last 2 years. China's actually dialed it back a notch, so we're kind of figuring that one out. But North Korea is one we got to worry about because we don't know what they're going to do.
Why has China dialed it back a notch? What happened?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things. You know, 5 years ago, yesterday, we released a report on APT Unit 61398, that kind of with the New York Times exposed.
I remember the front page of the New York Times had the pictures. Yeah.
I didn't think anybody would care about cybersecurity, but they did. And what we learned from that is when you expose a group and you get modern nations to have bilateral conversations, you can make a difference. And that happened with China. They changed their targeting, they changed their aggression, and they're just different in how they target
Meaning they go
US
after
companies.
other places, or they still are engaging, trying to go after U.S. companies?
Well, I think it's a funded effort, and it's hard to kill it. So they've got a whole bunch of hackers over there that hack for a living, and they probably have picked other targets.
With North Korea, I mean, just the idea that they used to focus on South Korea, now they're focusing on us. Is that a reflection of the heightened tensions that come between our two nations?
It took me 18 years to figure this out, but it's absolutely the case. As we respond to breaches around the world, they are absolutely tied to geopolitical conditions. No question about it.
So it's just a reflection of what we see
absolutely.
happening
I think the silent intent of nations, you can see it in cyberspace.
You know, I keep asking what the U.S. government should do. What should U.S. companies be doing if they may be potential targets?
Well, I think there's a lot of things you can do. And by the way, it's such a long answer. I just slimmed down a 700-page book down to a quick answer for TV. But at the end of the day, you need to be aware of these threats. Most U.S. companies are not going to be targeted by North Korea right now. But if you can be hacked, you will be hacked. There's a thing called crypto mining right now where the North Koreans are trying to break in basically anywhere so that they can get money. They want Bitcoin. They want some kind of digital currency.
So we talked about this morning. They want digital currency because it can't be traced, and it's the easiest way to do
It's an anonymous currency. It's a beautiful thing for folks.
I mean, that's a little different than maybe what we thought of with the Sony hacks, which seemed like it was a much more targeted effort because they were mad about the movie that Sony put out.
Exactly right. Sony was a targeted breach, but these things for Bitcoin or for some kind of cryptocurrency, they're spray and pray attacks. If you can be hacked, you will be hacked. So
that's government-based, though? Is it because they are facing more pressure from additional constraints that we've been saying we don't want anybody doing trade, so they have to find other ways to get money?
It could be. They're restricted on capital markets, so they got to get money some other way.
Of all the countries we worry about, who do you put at the top of the list? And I ask this because Saudi Arabia came out over the weekend and said Iran.
Iran's been very active. I could tell you this. Russia's probably the best at it. From what we see, Russia's got the best counter-forensics. When they want to operate below the radar, they can do so. But 2017, to me, was the year of Iran. We're out of the blue. We just responded to more breaches from Iran than any other year. We didn't see them until about 2008. But when you get to operate unfettered for nearly a decade, you get pretty good at this. So Iran's definitely emerged on the global scene hacking.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.